For over 4,000 years, one peninsula in East Asia has been this incredible cradle of civilization, a battleground for empires, and just a wellspring of culture that has seriously shaped the world we live in today. So today, we're going to trace that epic story of Korea. Okay, let's dive right in.
And this really is the big question, isn't it? How did one people with one shared culture end up splitting into two completely separate nations? That's the mystery we're unpacking here. And to get to the bottom of it, we have to go way, way back to the very beginning.
All right, so our journey kicks off in an era of myths and legends, the dawn of kingdoms, really. This is where the very first foundations of Korean identity were hammered into place. I mean, think about this. The story starts all the way back in 2333 BCE with the legendary founding of Gojoseon. For centuries, you had different states fighting for control. They even had to deal with an invasion from the super powerful Han Dynasty in China. But out of all that chaos, by the 1st century AD, three major players emerged that would define the era: Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla.
Then, a huge moment comes in the 7th century. After all this intense rivalry, the Silla kingdom makes a really smart strategic move. They team up with Tang China. This alliance gave them the power they needed to conquer their rivals and, for the very first time, unite most of the peninsula. This was a game changer, forging a new collective Korean identity.
And that unity, well, it paved the way for two of the longest-running and most important dynasties in all of Korean history.
First up, you've got the Goryeo dynasty, which kicked off in 918 and finished the job of unifying the peninsula. This was an era of unbelievable resilience. They somehow withstood these massive Mongol invasions before eventually having to become a vassal state. Then, in 1392, General Yi Songye establishes the mighty Joseon dynasty, which would go on to rule for more than 500 years and move the capital to what we now know as Seoul.
Now, within that long Joseon era, there's one ruler who just stands head and shoulders above the rest: King Sejong the Great. His reign in the 15th century wasn't just about keeping things stable. It was a genuine golden age of science, social reform, and culture. And it all led to one of the greatest linguistic achievements in history.
This was King Sejong's absolute masterpiece, Hangul, the Korean alphabet. See, before this, writing was done with these super complex Chinese characters that only the rich and powerful could learn. This new alphabet was designed from the ground up to be simple, scientific, and easy for everyone to learn. It was so much more than a gift of literacy. It was this powerful act of building a nation, creating a unique cultural identity that stood apart from China. But, golden ages rarely last forever. The Joseon dynasty would soon face these immense pressures from the outside world that would test the kingdom to its absolute limits, and it led to a period of invasion, isolation, and eventually total occupation.
So, faced with this rising tide of Western and Japanese imperialism, Korea's first response was to just shut the world out. It literally earned the nickname the Hermit Kingdom. But that kind of isolation just couldn't hold. The pressure, especially from Japan, became too much, and its doors were forced open, kicking off a truly dark chapter in its history.
In 1910, Japan formally annexed Korea, and a brutal 35-year occupation began. The suffering was just immense. The source material points out that over 5 million Koreans were forced into labor. Tens of thousands of men were conscripted into the Japanese army, and an estimated 200,000 women and girls were forced into sexual slavery as what were called comfort women. So the end of World War II brings liberation from Japan, which you'd think would be a time for celebration. But it didn't bring peace. Instead, it carved this deep, painful scar right across the heart of the peninsula.
This one number, it says it all. The 30th parallel. Just a line of latitude on a map, right? Nope. It would become one of the most politically charged, heavily armed borders on the planet, splitting a people who'd been unified for over 1,000 years.
So how did this actually happen? It's a critical point. After Japan surrendered, the winning powers, the Allies, made a decision that would change everything. The deal was the Soviet Union would occupy the North and the United States would occupy the South. Well, by 1948, the Cold War had frozen this divide in place, creating two hostile, separate states. And just 2 years later, the North invaded the South, starting the absolutely devastating Korean War. It ended in a stalemate,
creating that heavily fortified demilitarized zone, or DMZ, that still exists today.
From that moment of division, North and South Korea set off onto radically, and I mean radically, different paths, creating one of the starkest contrasts you can find anywhere on Earth. I mean, just look at the difference. It's staggering. South Korea had what's called the Miracle on the Han River, transforming into a global economic giant and a vibrant democracy that now exports its culture all over the world. Meanwhile, North Korea became this isolated totalitarian state run by the Kim dynasty. Its economy totally collapsed after the Soviet Union fell, and today it's mostly known for being a nuclear-armed international pariah.
So after thousands of years of a shared story, the peninsula is still defined by this 70-year-old division. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? After traveling down such completely different roads for so long, can those two paths ever possibly lead back to one?